Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
This episode is sponsored by Lifeway Kefir, creator of those delicious little kefir dairy drinks that you've probably seen in your local grocery store. They're tasty and good for you too. An 8-ounce serving of Lifeway Kefir contains 11 grams of all-natural protein, 12 different probiotics, 30% of your daily calcium requirement, and it's 99% lactose-free. And best of all, I have a coupon for you. Go to lifewaykefir.com/courtjunkie for a $1 off coupon just for you Court Junkie listeners. That's Lifeway, KEFIR.com. Hey Court Junkies, this is Jillian, and you are listening to episode 13 of the Court Junkie podcast. Before we get to today's episode, I want to thank all of you for your support. You're helping support this podcast just by listening, subscribing, sharing with your friends, and leaving me reviews. If you want to do more, you can visit our sponsor's website, lifewaykefir.com/courtjunkie, or you can donate as little as $1 a month on Patreon by going to courtjunkie.com/support. You'll also immediately get access to ad-free versions of my episodes. That's courtjunkie.com/support. Now, on to the show. As most of you probably know, the beginning of every year represents a huge event for American football, the Super Bowl. And this year, the New England Patriots are once again headed there. And if things had turned out differently, 27-year-old Aaron Hernandez would likely still be on that team. Aaron was drafted to the New England Patriots in the 4th round of the 2010 draft. He signed a 4-year contract and was the team's number 2 tight end. In August 2012, Aaron signed a 5-year, $40 million extension with the team, an extension that many fans considered proof that Aaron would have a lasting career in the NFL. Aaron seemed to have it all. He wasn't just another young NFL football player. He was actually really good and was quickly earning respect in the league as one of the better tight ends. Rob Gronkowski, the Patriots' first-string tight end, had been dealing with an injury, and there was talk that Aaron would be getting more playtime on the receiving end of none other than Tom Brady. So not only was his football career going really well, but his personal life seemed to be as well. He was engaged to his fiancée, Cheyenne Jenkins, who he had known since they were kids, and the couple had a young daughter. They lived in a big, beautiful home in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, which was about 16 miles north of Providence, Rhode Island, and 38 miles southwest of Boston. But everything wasn't as it seemed, and hindsight, as they say, is 20/20. In a September 2015 article in Rolling Stone, friends said that Aaron, who was originally from Bristol, Connecticut, had been using drugs and hanging out with gang members for years, even before his NFL career had started. They said that he was paranoid about his life being in danger and that he carried a gun with him wherever he went. They said he hadn't been himself for years, since his father died in 2006, when Aaron was just 16. While in college, Aaron reportedly got into fights and failed numerous drug tests. Now, looking back, the Patriots' senior football advisor says that the Patriots were aware that Aaron had off-field problems before drafting him in 2010, but they did it anyway. And now, instead of being in the playoffs this year, Aaron Hernandez is instead sitting in a jail cell, a disgraced former football star who is now a convicted murderer. And if that wasn't bad enough, he's awaiting yet another trial for 2 additional murders, a double homicide that occurred in 2012. That's right, Aaron Hernandez didn't allegedly kill just one person. He may have killed at least 2 others and attempted to kill one more, all during the same time period that he was catching passes in the NFL. It's a bizarre case with twists and turns made for a TV movie, but unfortunately, it's real life. I wanted to go behind the scenes of this case, beyond what you may have heard, beyond the headlines. So I reached out to Kevin Armstrong, a staff writer with the New York Daily News. Kevin has been involved in this case since day one, and while I tell you about the case, Kevin is going to take us behind the scenes of the arrest and the trial of Aaron Hernandez. Aaron's next trial on the additional 2 murders is scheduled to start on February 13th. So before we get to the details of what you can expect in that trial, let's go back and look at how we got to where we are today with this case. It all started in June 2013. Odin Lloyd was 27 years old. He was the firstborn of 3 children, the only son, and as his mother described him, he was the backbone of their family. He lived with his mom and 2 sisters in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and he was the type of guy who would take the bus and then ride his bike 20 miles to work every day, where he worked at a lawn fertilizer company. Odin loved football. In fact, he was a linebacker for the Boston Bandits, a semi-pro football team. And it just so happened that his girlfriend's sister was engaged to Aaron Hernandez, tight end on the New England Patriots. And in the early morning hours of June 17th, 2013, Aaron and 2 friends picked up Odin from his home in Dorchester, about 45 minutes from where Aaron lived. After Odin got in the car, a little after 3 a.m., he sent a text message to his sister. It read, "You saw who I'm with?" At 3:22 a.m., Odin texted her again, NFL. And a minute after that, he texted her again, "Just so you know." And that would be the last text message that Odin Lloyd would ever send. A few days later, reports started surfacing in the media that police in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, were questioning Aaron in connection with the death of a 27-year-old man who had been found in an industrial park less than a mile from Aaron's home. That man was Odin Lloyd. The media got wind of this, and reporters camped out in front of Aaron's home for weeks on end, waiting and watching to see if he would be arrested. Kevin Armstrong was one of them.
I was there from the start in terms of, you see all those CNN trucks and all these different media outlets starting to camp outside his house, and nobody knows whether he's guilty or innocent or even involved yet, but definitely the police for several papers and national outlets were clearly pointing at Aaron Hernandez. It was pretty much a waiting game in terms of the investigation. You didn't know whether he was going to make a statement, whether the cops were going to come and take him away, or then there was a Saturday and a caravan of police cars and law enforcement vehicles just showed up and started to take evidence and all kinds of bags, and they were flashing lights in the back of the house and whatnot. You knew then, if you didn't know it already, that this was not going to just fade away, that he was clearly the suspect, whether he was charged or not at that point.
Indeed, the story wasn't going to fade away. 3 days after investigators executed a search warrant on Aaron's home, an Attleboro District Court official told reporters that an arrest warrant was being drawn up for Aaron on obstruction of justice charges. Police sources said that the security system at Aaron's home had been intentionally destroyed, and that his cell phone, which had been handed over to police, had been handed over in pieces, and it appeared to be smashed. The police sources also leaked info that a team of house cleaners had been hired to scrub Aaron's mansion, which officers found to be suspect. Aaron's attorney released a statement to the media, which essentially said that due to the ongoing investigation, they wouldn't be commenting. And meanwhile, as the reports and the suspicion grew, Aaron started losing endorsement deals. On June 22nd, police were at Aaron's home again, executing yet another search warrant. They seemed to be narrowing in on their guy. And sure enough, on June 26, 2013, the media's perseverance while being camped in front of Aaron's home paid off. Investigators showed up and took him into custody.
Yeah, they didn't do it in the darkness of night, but they did it early one morning. I want to say pre-9 a.m. in terms of the workday and whatnot, and you just kind of, here comes the Massachusetts detectives, and they knock on the door, and he's shirtless when he opens the door, and he's got his various tattoos across the body, so you knew it was Aaron himself answering the door, and they stepped inside for a minute, and he comes out with handcuffs on in his back, and I can clearly see the sequence play out still. He comes out, they actually were going to put him in the car, and then they couldn't quite fit him with the way that they had handcuffed him, so they took him back out and rearranged, and there he was. He hasn't been free since.
It was quite a spectacle. The giant NFL player in his red shorts and white t-shirt being led out of his house in handcuffs by dozens of investigators. Aaron was arrested and charged with the murder of Odin Lloyd. Later that day, Aaron appeared in court for his arraignment, and prosecutor William McCauley laid out their version of what they had uncovered so far. Here's what he said. In the early morning hours of June 17th, 2013, Aaron summoned over 2 friends from out of state, and in the middle of the night, the 3 men went to pick up Odin. Aaron was angry at Odin for talking to the wrong people during a visit to a nightclub 2 nights earlier. Odin, Aaron, and his 2 friends made a stop at a gas station, and within minutes, Odin was dead. He had been shot 6 times, with the final 2 shots fired by somebody standing directly above him. They then left his body abandoned in the industrial park. McCauley said that Odin was nervous about Aaron's intentions while he was in the car. He told the court about those text messages Odin had sent to his sister, asking if she had seen who he was with, and saying, NFL, just so you know. McCauley told the court that investigators had pieced together a timeline using cell phone tracking, text messages, and surveillance video. McCauley said that the timeline would show that Aaron orchestrated the execution of Odin. They had surveillance video from Aaron's home that hadn't been destroyed and that showed him with a gun before and after Odin's murder. They also had surveillance video showing Aaron picking up Odin at 2:30 a.m. on the night of the murder in a rented silver Nissan Altima, and surveillance video showing him going to and coming from the site where Odin's body had been found. And then later, at 3:29 a.m., Aaron was on video arriving home, getting out of his car with a gun in his hand. Aaron pleaded not guilty and was ordered held without bail. Within 2 hours of his arrest, the New England Patriots officially released him. A couple weeks later, 2 other men were arrested and charged in connection with Odin's death. Aaron's 2 friends who had allegedly been there with him the night that Odin was killed, Ernest Wallace and Carlos Ortiz. Aaron's trial started in January 2015. He was facing charges for the murder of Odin Lloyd, as well as charges for unlawful possession of a firearm and unlawful possession of ammunition. Jury selection lasted about a week, and all potential jurors received a questionnaire with 51 questions, including, "Are you a fan of the New England Patriots?" and "Have you ever attended a New England Patriots game?" as well as their thoughts on tattoos and marijuana. The judge also took other measures to make sure that Aaron's celebrity wasn't celebrated throughout the trial.
In the courthouse in general, the judge banned any Patriot merchandise. If you showed up at the courthouse at the metal detectors wearing, and not just related to this case, wearing a Patriots hat or a jacket, and remember, this is like right after they win their Super Bowl that year, so all these people have championship hats, everything in the town. None of that was allowed in. So that was, one thing that was, just blocked. They didn't want a celebrity treatment of Hernandez in any way.
Aaron's trial took place at the Bristol County Superior Court in Fall River, Massachusetts. Aaron's legal team was led by Jamie Sultan, Michael Fee, and Charles Rankin. The prosecution was led by William McCauley, Patrick Bomberg, and Roger L. Michael Jr., and the judge was E. Susan Garsh. The interesting thing about the prosecutor-judge dynamic in this case is that one of the very first motions filed was from the prosecution, asking for the judge to recuse herself. They cited the fact that Judge Garsh and Prosecutor McCauley had a tense past from a prior trial that they had been involved in together back in 2010. But after taking the motion under consideration, however, Judge Garsh refused, saying that she could remain unbiased. The prosecution laid out their case over 9 weeks, and they called 131 witnesses to the stand. I'm not going to go over all of those witnesses, but I will highlight some of the main parts of the trial. Opening statements began on January 29, 2015, the weekend before Aaron's former team was headed to the Super Bowl without him. If convicted, Aaron would face life in prison without parole. Judge Garsh told the jury that prosecutors did not have to prove that Aaron pulled the trigger, but they did have to show beyond a reasonable doubt that he knowingly participated in the commission of a crime and that he did so with criminal intent. During his opening statement, Prosecutor Bomberg said that on June 15, 2013, 2 days before the murder, Aaron, Odin, and some other friends had gone out to a club. While inside that club, Bomberg said that Odin and his friends were talking to people that Aaron didn't like, and when Aaron left the club, he was angry at Odin. And then in the early morning hours of June 17, 2013, Bomberg said that Aaron and his 2 friends, Ernest Wallace and Carlos Ortiz, picked up Odin and drove him to the industrial park. Bomberg said that they had cell phone activity and surveillance video footage that would put Odin and Aaron together that night. He then played video surveillance of a Nissan Altima that Aaron had rented and had been driving that night. The video shows the car pulling up to Odin's house and Odin getting in it. Bomberg said the video surveillance and cell phone records shows the route they took that night to get to the park. Bomberg then played video surveillance from outside of Aaron's home of Aaron and his 2 friends returning at 3:27 a.m. without Odin. He then switched to the surveillance video inside Aaron's home that showed the 3 men walking in, and then a still shot of Aaron holding a gun and then taking it down to the basement. Bomberg also told the jury that they had DNA evidence on a marijuana cigarette that had been found at the crime scene that matched both Aaron's and Odin's, and DNA that was consistent with Aaron's that was on a shell casing that had been found inside of the Nissan Altima that Aaron had rented and was driving that night. The casing also matched other casings found at the park by Odin's body. They were all shot from a .45 caliber Glock handgun that Bomberg said still hadn't been found. Bomberg said they also had footprints and tire tracks at the scene. Footprints that matched the retro Air Jordans that Aaron had been wearing that day, and tire tracks that matched that of a Nissan Altima. When it was the defense's turn to make their opening statement, they took a rather interesting approach.
In terms of the opening statement, you had Michael Fee, his attorney, came out very strong in terms of saying, this lifestyle that you're going to hear about Aaron kind of partaking in is not anything new in terms of wealthy athletes. They kind of made it sound like his still going out to the club and smoking inordinate amounts of marijuana and drinking and, kind of bringing girls back, even though he had a fiance and everything, that was to be expected for somebody in his position. And, there was an immediate situation where you're kind of saying, well, that's not how average person in Massachusetts, especially in Fall River, this, kind of old mill town, is going to look at that. I think they had their values and they had their, way of looking at life. And, I thought that his defense was trying to skirt over a lot of his shortfallings as a man, let alone as a New England Patriot.
The prosecution began their case with the condition of Odin's body. A witness described how he had found Odin lying in the grass, with flies in his nostrils. The jury was shown photos, and Odin's mom left the courtroom crying. Perhaps one of the most interesting aspects of this trial was the dynamic between the two sisters in the courtroom, Odin's girlfriend Shania and her sister Cheyenne, Aaron's fiancée. It was obvious that they were both on separate sides. Shania would sit with Odin's family, and Cheyenne would sit with Aaron's mother.
They're sitting on opposite sides of the courtroom. They give testimony, and it's clear that, there's no relationship at that time. I have no idea whether they've patched things up or, what the relationship is moving forward, but you would imagine that's not coming together again anytime soon. And, Shania, Odin's girlfriend, it's going to law school at the time. She's, clearly trying to, make a great life for herself. And then you had Cheyenne, who was Aaron's fiance, and she's just completely, standing behind Hernandez at that time. It was just a fascinating separation of family.
When Shania testified, she said that Aaron and Odin liked to smoke marijuana together, but that the two of them never really hung out unless she or Cheyenne were there. In fact, she said the only time the two men ever hung out without her was the weekend that Odin was murdered. Shania also testified about her sister's bizarre behavior after Odin's death. She described it as secretive and not normal. She said after Odin's murder, she was over at Aaron and Cheyenne's house. She said at one point, she witnessed Cheyenne go down to the basement of the home with a black plastic bag in her hand. Then, minutes later, Shania saw her in the backyard, walking towards the house. Cheyenne then asked to borrow Shania's car, something she had never done before. She returned 30 minutes later. The implication being that Aaron's fiancé helped get rid of possible evidence, namely the murder weapon. Shania also testified that after the murder, Aaron seemed really stressed out. When it was Cheyenne's turn to testify, the press had a field day. Prior to the trial, Cheyenne had been charged with perjury for lying to the grand jury when she told them that she couldn't remember what she did with a box that she had disposed of after getting a text message from Aaron. And just days prior to calling her to the stand, the prosecution had received permission from the judge to grant her immunity so she wouldn't be prosecuted for anything she said. The media, along with the majority of trial watchers, were wondering if Cheyenne would actually testify against her own fiancé. And she did. But she certainly couldn't recall a lot of things. Cheyenne testified that she had found a gun in a drawer in the home prior to Odin's murder, but she couldn't recall very many details about it. She said that the day after Odin's murder, Aaron had messaged her and asked her to remove a box from their basement. She said she removed it, borrowed her sister's car, and dropped it off in a dumpster somewhere. But she said she couldn't recall where. And that box, which prosecutors believed contained the murder weapon, was never found. Before I continue, I want to stop here for a second and tell you a little bit more about my sponsor for this episode, Lifeway Kefir. So you already know that they are these delicious little dairy drinks, that they taste even better than yogurt, and that they're loaded up with nutrients. But did you know that you can incorporate Lifeway Kefir into some really tasty recipes? If you visit lifewaykefir.com and check out their blog, you'll come across recipes for roasted red pepper dip, wild berry pie smoothie parfait, and coconut banana macaroon smoothie, just to name a few. And if you go to the website they set up just for you court junkies, you can get a $1 off coupon. Go to Lifeway, KEFIR.com/courtjunkie. Now, back to the show. North Attleboro Police Detective Daniel Arrighi testified. He said that he questioned Aaron the day after Odin's body was discovered. He told the jurors that keys to a rental car that had been registered under Aaron's name had been found in Odin's pocket. So naturally, police went to Aaron's house to question him. Arrighi and a Massachusetts State Police trooper arrived at Aaron's house around 9:40 p.m. that night. He said Aaron didn't come out of his house until 10:30, and that when he did, he was visibly agitated and upset. Aaron told them that he had been watching them on his home surveillance. He said that the last time he saw Odin was up his way yesterday. And after a few more questions, Aaron said, "What's with all the questions?" and then turned and walked back inside. He then told them, "You aren't coming in here." North Attleboro Police Detective Michael Elliott testified that he went to the rental car company where Aaron had rented the car from during his investigation. He said an employee told him that they had found .45 caliber shell casings and chewed up blue bubble gum in the car after Aaron had returned it. At first, the employee thought nothing of it, so she threw the items away. But when she heard about Odin's murder, she called the police. Elliott said that he looked through the dumpster in the parking lot and found the items. The casings matched the casings found by Odin's body, and the gum, along with the casing, both had Aaron's DNA on them. The rental car employee also testified, and she said that Aaron had offered her bubble gum as he was dropping the car off. Blue bubble gum. Then prosecutors went to the motive. Their theory, of course, being that Odin and Aaron had gone to a club a couple nights prior, and that Aaron had gotten angry at him. So they called one of Odin's friends to the stand, who had been with them that night. He testified that Aaron had been acting angry at the club, and that he had even caught him glaring at Odin. Two of Aaron's housekeepers testified that they saw guns in Aaron's home when they cleaned it in the month leading up to Odin's murder. Another housekeeper said that she saw Aaron tampering with a security camera the day after the murder. Brian McDonough, Aaron's personal trainer, testified that Aaron failed to show up for his personal training session the afternoon after the murder. McDonough said that Aaron texted him something serious came up and that he didn't know when he could reschedule. And speaking of text messages, Aaron's cell phone played a big role in the trial, too. Prosecutors presented evidence that showed that text messages Aaron had exchanged with his friends before the killing had been deleted from Aaron's phone. They had been able to pull text messages from Odin's phone from Aaron about 6 hours prior to the killing. Aaron texted him and essentially said that he was going to come by and pick him up later that night. Prosecutors also showed that Ernest Wallace, Aaron's friend who was with him the night of the murder, had placed multiple calls to Odin from his cell phone in the hours before the murder, including one the very same minute that Odin was seen getting into the car outside of his home that night. And then there were those tire tracks at the scene. Trooper Todd Gerard of the Massachusetts State Police testified that when they went to examine the rental car, they noticed 4 stones wedged into the rear passenger side tire. Those stones made the tire tracks unique, and they determined that it was a match to the one at the scene. As prosecutors were presenting their lengthy case, I wondered if Kevin noticed anything about what Aaron's demeanor had been like during the trial. What was Aaron's demeanor like I don't know if you noticed any kind of difference from maybe when the jury was in the room versus when the jury was outside of the room? Did you notice any difference?
Yeah, there's definitely a lightness, and I don't think this is out of the norm in terms of how defendants, come across when the jury isn't there. There's a little more of a lightness. There's, discussions with his attorneys, and there was one situation that wasn't the trial. It was one of the pretrial hearings, and this was court sessions where he gets to come out of jail for the day and, kind of sees people, whereas he wouldn't have on that regular interaction. And him and his attorney, Michael Fee, had this kind of, joking back and forth. And Aaron's talking about, hate mail that he gets both in prison and, just these letters and whatnot. And his attorney is, kind of laughing it off. Michael Fee, he says, I get hate mail, death threats. How can you, be defending this guy? And, they're laughing about it. And the court camera actually captured it that day. And actually a microphone picked it up as well. And I wasn't expecting anything like that. And I was just like, talk about a window into that attorney-defendant, relationship in terms of what they're saying when they're in court there. And, on the other side, you have Odin Lloyd's family, and, they're all pretty much kind of staring holes in Hernandez, just upset with how he presents himself at times. He would smile, he would always have that strut, kind of a long step that he would take, and, the way he, sat down. And this is all a guy who his attorneys have to bring a suit and shoes to him every day, because otherwise he's in, handcuffs and dressed up in a prison outfit. But he's still acting like he's king of the locker room when he's in court there.
The jury also took a field trip to Aaron's home during the trial. But before they were scheduled to go, Judge Garsh ordered Aaron's defense attorneys to remove any items that they had added in the home since Aaron's arrest, including football trophies, religious items, and family photos. Those of you who followed the O.J. Simpson trial may recognize that tactic, to try and humanize the defendant as much as possible. Well, in this case, the judge wasn't having it. One of the last prosecution witnesses was a man named Alexander Bradley, and this name will be extremely important in Aaron's upcoming trial, which I'll get to shortly. Bradley is a former friend of Aaron's who testified that Aaron always kept a black box in his basement, which Bradley would see when he would come over. He said that the box had a firearm, money, and some marijuana inside of it. This box, in case you have forgotten, sounds like it may have been the same one that Cheyenne disposed of. After 9 weeks of testimony, the defense finally got their turn. But they didn't mount much of a defense. Most of their work was done during cross-examination of the state's 100-plus witnesses. They questioned the crime scene investigators and implied that it was a shoddy investigation, and they challenged the DNA evidence. So when it came time for them to present their case, they called 3 witnesses to the stand. 2 of those witnesses were forensic analysts who examined that piece of gum from Aaron's rental car with the shell casing attached to it. The analysts testified that it was extremely likely that the DNA from the bubble gum could have contaminated that shell casing, calling into question Aaron's DNA on that casing, which of course matched the ones by Odin's body. The third witness was a doctor who testified about the effects of the drug PCP. The defense was trying to float the theory that Aaron's 2 friends had been using PCP and had killed Odin while in a drug-induced state. There was no evidence to support this, but the defense didn't really have to present any. They merely needed to introduce doubt that Aaron was the killer. They also pointed to the surveillance image of Aaron at his home holding what prosecutors say is the murder weapon. They told jurors to consider whether that object might instead be an iPhone, an iPad, or maybe even a BlackBerry. But what really surprised everybody was in their closing arguments, when Aaron's defense attorney told the jury that Aaron had been there and had witnessed the murder, but that he wasn't the one who did it. The jury, which was made up of 7 men and 5 women, deliberated for nearly 6 days before returning their verdicts.
Madam Foreperson, on indictment 2013-983-A, charging the defendant Aaron Hernandez with murder, what say you, Madam Foreperson? Is the defendant not guilty, guilty of murder in the first degree, or guilty of murder in the second degree?
Guilty of murder in the first degree.
As the verdict was read, it was a woman, was the forewoman of the jury there. She, says he's guilty, it's murder. And he mouthed across the room, the cameras caught this as well. He says, you're wrong. You're wrong. And he's saying that to the jury.
Guilty. Aaron's life, let alone his football career, was virtually over. The gasps you heard in that audio of the verdict being read came from Odin's family, as well as Cheyenne and Aaron's mother. Cheyenne would be facing a new reality, and the verdict could have possibly been the first time that she had actually considered it. Kevin told me that he had noticed interaction between Aaron and Cheyenne during the trial that he thought was a little bizarre.
After the closing arguments were made by each side, then the jury is away and they're deliberating, and they allow Aaron and Cheyenne to kind of have a few quiet moments with each other, just random things. He's commenting, looking over. He says, "Is that a new tattoo?" And she's laughing, and that I believe it was a new tattoo. It was, he was away a significant amount of time before, at least a year, if not longer, between his arrest and the trial starting. So, there is that dynamic that he spent a good amount of time in jail before he even got to make his case and whatnot. But, he was joking with her that he's going to change his last name to Jenkins, and he's asking, is my mom around the room today? And he's rolling his eyes. Again, there's something off in terms of that relationship as well. So it was just you're just sitting there, and you're sitting 2 rows behind Cheyenne. There's Hernandez just talking like they're 2 lovebirds in study hall, kind of situation back in high school, and he does, from that day, a few days later, they come back with the verdict, and he's guilty, and he's craning his neck, trying to. They cuff him and they shackle him immediately when he's told to sit down, and he's looking back into the back of the courtroom to see his mother and Cheyenne, and he can't make eye contact with Cheyenne because she's crying in his mother's shoulder, and she just completely lost it. And eventually they rushed out of the courtroom, and took an elevator, got off site there quickly. And, by the time he was sentenced, then there was no one there in terms of his side. Everyone had vacated. Nobody was waiting out the rest of the process. He was guilty. He was going away, and his fiancée and his mother weren't even there when he came in the room the second time.
The jurors spoke with the media afterwards, including Kevin, about the process they went through and what evidence they believed and what evidence they didn't. And Kevin got the impression that the defense's closing argument may have just sealed the deal.
Throughout the whole trial, they never say that Aaron was there. They forced the prosecution to put Aaron at the murder scene, which they did very well in terms of they had DNA, they had the footprints, they had all these different elements that, it was clear. But finally, in the closing arguments, Jamie Sultan, one of Hernandez's attorneys, finally says Aaron was there. And when you talk to the jurors afterward, a number of them just couldn't believe that, they finally admitted that. And, essentially for them, in their mind, there was no way that Aaron was just there and the gun just disappeared. And all these things just happened to, lead back to him eventually. So that was one thing that the jurors definitely did not believe Cheyenne Jenkins, and they fully felt like the closing argument by the defense actually confirmed all of their notions to begin with, and thus they convicted him.
In every trial, there's evidence that investigators have uncovered that isn't presented in court because the judge has ruled that it's inadmissible, and this trial was no different. The jury never heard about those text messages that Odin sent to his sister, for example, referencing NFL. Nor did they hear that Aaron was a suspect and in fact had been charged with prior to the trial, that double homicide from 2012. But after the trial was over, the judge met with the jury and told them about this additional evidence. That text message from Odin to his sister still really haunts me, because to me, it shows that Odin was fearful of Aaron and that a part of him knew that he was in trouble.
Nobody will ever know exactly what was going through Lloyd's mind, but that's the closest hint that you can put together in terms of some form of panic or alerting someone to what potentially was going to happen that night.
If you watch the surveillance video of Odin walking up to Aaron's car the night of his murder, as he's being picked up, it's hard to not want to scream at him, to not get in the car, to tell him to stay at home, lock his doors, and to cut off all ties with Aaron. But sadly, we know how it ends. He gets into the car, and the lives of his loved ones are forever changed. Aaron received life in prison without parole for the murder of Odin Lloyd. Ernest Wallace, one of the two men who was with Aaron the night of the killings, was acquitted in May 2016 of the murder, but found guilty of accessory after the fact. And Aaron's other friend who was with him that night, Carlos Ortiz, pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact in June 2016. Both men have been sentenced to 4.5 to 7 years in prison. Cheyenne's perjury charges were dropped not long after Aaron's conviction. So now, here we are, going into February, and Aaron is awaiting yet another trial, yet another murder trial. So, what are the details of that case? Well, as investigators were executing search warrants in June 2013 in Odin Lloyd's murder, they came across an SUV in Aaron's uncle's garage in Bristol, Connecticut. It was a Toyota 4Runner that witnesses had seen at the scene of an unsolved double homicide in 2012. So when investigators came across that SUV, they got another warrant to search it for gun residue. And sure enough, it was the vehicle that they had been looking for. In May 2014, about 8 months before going to trial for Odin's murder, Aaron was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecutor outlined the case in a press conference.
On July 16, 2012, the victims arrived at the Cure Lounge on Tremont Street in Boston's Theater District. By coincidence, Aaron Hernandez and another individual entered the club at the same time. Our investigation has not uncovered any evidence that these several individuals were known to each other, but their chance encounter inside the club triggered a series of events that culminated in these murders. After the victims left the club at approximately 2 a.m., they drove down Tremont Street. Unbeknownst to them, Hernandez followed behind, traveling in an SUV. When the victim's car stopped at a red light on Shawmut Ave, waiting to turn onto Herald Street, the SUV pulled up beside the victim's car on the right. Aaron Hernandez then fired a .38 caliber revolver multiple times from the driver's side of his vehicle into the passenger side of the victim's vehicle. Daniel De Abreu, who was the driver, suffered multiple wounds, including a fatal gunshot wound to the chest. Safiro Furtado, who was in the front passenger seat, also suffered multiple wounds, including a fatal gunshot wound to the head. 2 backseat passengers escaped physical injury and fled on foot. The third man remained in the vehicle with his friends and suffered a gunshot wound to his arm. From last June forward, there were a number of significant developments in this investigation. Those developments include the recovery of the car Hernandez used during the murders, and which he later hid in a relative's garage in Bristol, Connecticut, and the recovery of the murder weapon from an individual with ties to Hernandez. I expect more information will be forthcoming at the arraignment.
The prosecution has since revealed their suspected motive, that while in the club, one of the 2 men had spilled a drink on Aaron and didn't apologize, which made him angry. The double murder charge isn't the only charge that Aaron will be facing at the trial in February. He'll also be facing a charge of witness intimidation. Prosecutors contend that in order to shut him up about the murders, he shot his friend, Alexander Bradley, who had been with him that night. Aaron allegedly shot him in the face and then left him by the side of the road to die. Bradley survived but lost his right eye. Initially, Bradley wouldn't tell police who had shot him, but he filed a lawsuit and named Aaron as the gunman. That lawsuit was later settled, and Bradley is expected to be the state's star witness. So, going into the trial, what sort of evidence is the prosecution expected to present? Well, pretrial hearings are still going on, so we don't know exactly what will be presented and what will be kept out. However, according to court documents released in this case, we do know that the prosecution has the following evidence. Gun residue on the SUV that was found in Aaron's uncle's garage, and we do know that Aaron was allegedly driving that SUV the night of the murders. A duffel bag that had been found that contained the clothes police believed that Aaron was wearing that night, based on surveillance video. Text messages between Aaron and Alexander Bradley. The murder weapon, a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson. And it's pretty interesting how police found the murder weapon and when. It was during a traffic accident investigation in Springfield, Massachusetts in June 2013, the same month that Aaron murdered Odin. One of the cars involved in the accident belonged to a 19-year-old girl who told police that she had given a ride to a group of football players who had then left their bags in her trunk. The gun was located in the bag, and ballistics matched it to the shooting. Another thing the prosecution has, and that they can introduce at trial, are Aaron's tattoos. Believe it or not, Aaron's recent prison tattoos will be entered into evidence against him. The judge just ruled on this last week, and he said that the defendant's conduct in ordering and obtaining these tattoos could be viewed as constituting an implied admission or as evidence reflecting consciousness of guilt. One of the tattoos in question is allegedly of the same type of gun that was used in the shootings. Another one features a semi-automatic handgun, a bullet, and a puff of smoke, which prosecutors say represents the incident when Aaron shot Alexander Bradley in the face. And a third tattoo says, "God forgives." And perhaps most importantly, the prosecution has eyewitness testimony. There are 2 survivors from the vehicle who have identified Aaron as the gunman in pre-trial hearings, as well as Alexander Bradley. In fact, Kevin thinks that this trial has a lot more evidence than Odin's. There's also another little tidbit that he thinks will be effective.
Hernandez shot at the men so many times, whatever it was, say 6 or 8 bullets in the revolver, that he continued to click and pull the trigger after all of the bullets were gone. And I think out of all the testimony that I heard in the first time, and obviously there's less that's revealed before trial for the next time, but when I heard that, that he would have put 11 bullets in them if he could have, that's going to, raise a lot of eyebrows and, talk about an image for the jury to carry with them throughout the entirety of the trial. I think that's going to remain with them. Yeah, this one, they also have, like I said, so the first trial, they didn't have a gun. There was a lot of evidence that they had to piece together just to point the finger at Hernandez. This one, they have the gun. They have that testimony both from Bradley and I believe 2 people survived the shooting who were in the other vehicle. So 2 men were killed, but there were also 2 that survived. It's my understanding that they'll testify to that sound effect as well. So there's just a lot more. It seems a lot cleaner this time around in terms of the evidence and piecing it all together than it did the last time on circumstantial evidence. They have a lot of hard stuff this time around.
So what won't they be able to tell the jury? The judge has ruled that prosecutors cannot tell the jury about Aaron's conviction in Odin Lloyd's murder. Too prejudicial. And there's one other interesting piece of info for you court junkies. Aaron's attorney for this trial is none other than Jose Baez, Casey Anthony's former attorney. The judge, though, is obviously different for this one, too. Judge Jeffrey Locke. I'll be following this trial closely, and I'll post another episode after the trial is over. Kevin, however, will be attending.
February 13th is the next trial, and I'll be covering that both for the New York Daily News and I'll be on Twitter and social media with at Kevin G. Armstrong. And if you guys have any questions, tweet at me or email, whatever you want to do in terms of questions. But it'll be another interesting study of the law, and just in terms of whether what has been alleged will stand, and just what the future is for Hernandez at this point.
Jury selection is scheduled to begin on February 13th, but the judge recently delayed the start of testimony to March 1st. During a court hearing last week, Aaron's attorney, Jose Baez, requested that the trial be pushed back, saying that it is by far the most unprepared I have been in a courtroom in any case across this country. But the judge wasn't swayed. So, one last thing. In case you're wondering, Aaron has been less than a model citizen while in prison. He's been involved in at least 3 separate fights, and guards have even found a makeshift knife in his cell. I guess some people may never learn. I want to give a special thanks to Kevin Armstrong from the New York Daily News. If you're interested in following a trial reporter during Aaron's next trial that starts on February 13th, follow him on Twitter at Kevin G. Armstrong. And thanks as always to all of you. Please subscribe and leave me a review if you like the show. And please consider joining my Facebook discussion group. It's a great little community of court junkies and trial watchers, and we discuss a bunch of interesting cases, as well as these episodes. To support this podcast, you can go to courtjunkie.com/support and donate as little as $1 a month. If you do that, you'll get access to early, ad-free episodes. And I want to thank a few of my Patreon supporters right now. Thank you to Maggie, Kristen, Jennifer K, Claire, and Kylie. I really appreciate your support. And lastly, thanks to Lifeway Kefir. Please go to their site and redeem their exclusive offer just for Court Junkie listeners. That's Lifeway, KEFIR.com/courtjunkie. Thanks, and until next time.